This is Dr. Rashmi Nagesh from Department of Life Sciences, Kristu Jayanti College, Autonomous, Bengaluru. Today I am here to talk about gene interactions. So gene interactions, before knowing about gene interactions, we all know the father of genetics is Mendel. So it is Mendel's experimentation on pea plant, all those 7 characteristics. He was the one who gave us all those concepts that it is the gene, it is the allele that is being present over a particular loci which will confer, or its expression will give you a particular phenotype or a characteristics. So these gene interactions are much deviated from the Mendelian inheritance pattern. So where Mendel told that it was a single gene or a single allele that is being present over a loci of a chromosome which will confer a particular characteristic or a trait or a phenotype. But here in case of gene interaction, it is not a single gene or a single allele that is responsible for a particular character or a phenotypic characteristic in the individual. So gene interaction is all about the interaction of different genes or alleles that are present over a chromosome which are responsible for a particular phenotype of an organism. So when we describe or discuss about gene interaction, it takes place in 2 different ways. One is allelic gene interaction and another one is non-allelic gene interaction. So what exactly are this allelic and non-allelic gene interaction? So allelic gene interactions occurs between different forms of alleles on a single chromosome. So these allelic gene interactions can be seen in different cases like complete dominance, incomplete dominance, co-dominance and multiple alleles. So complete dominance, you can see complementary genes. So what happens is that both the genes or both the alleles which are responsible, they are complementing to each other and they are giving you a particular phenotype which is not that as that of the parents. This is complementary genes. So moving on to incomplete dominance. Incomplete dominance, again it is a pair of alleles that are responsible for a particular characteristics where you have 2 gametes or 2 parental characters here. So one of the character which is dominant is not able to completely suppress the activity or the expression of the other allele which is responsible for giving that characteristic. So as a result, the F1 generation will be intermediate here in case of incomplete dominance. So moving on to co-dominance, it is like 2 parental characteristics. So both are dominant and they are both complementing each other. But here both the characteristics of the parents of F1 generation can be seen here in case of co-dominance. And lastly, it is multiple alleles. The very good example is the human blood grouping types, so which is being governed by multiple alleles. So moving on to the non-allelic gene interaction. So non-allelic gene interaction tells you that it is the interaction between genes that are located on the same chromosome or different chromosome but do not involve allele of the same gene. So this is your non-allelic gene interaction. So gene interaction occurs in 2 different ways. One is allelic gene interaction, another one is non-allelic gene interaction. Non-allelic gene interactions are the interaction between genes which are located on same or it could be different chromosomes. So here we have complementary genes, epistasis, dominant and recessive epistasis, supplementary genes, duplicate genes and the cumulative effect. So epistasis is dominant and recessive. Epistasis is a condition where one of the gene which is dominant will completely mask the effect of recessive one. Recessive epistasis is the recessive gene completely masks the dominant gene from getting expressed. Supplementary is like neither of the alleles are responsible or the genes are responsible for a phenotypic characteristics. Duplicate genes, it is duplicating the effect in the F1 generation, and cumulative effect. So whatever the expression that is seen in the F1 generation will be having an additional effect in the F1 generation. So moving on to the significance of gene interactions. So gene interactions can be studied in model organism in order to understand the functional relationship between the genes that are responsible for a particular characteristics. So model organism, different model organisms are there. It could be Drosophila, C. elegans, whatever. So when you consider a particular phenotypic character, so which are the genes or which are the alleles that are responsible for them? So to know the functional relationship between these genes or alleles, so gene interaction studies will be very much important. So gene interactions are also important for understanding the key components and the mechanism involved in a genetic pathway. So this could be like it is a genetic pathway where the genes and the alleles will interact with one another to give you a particular biological function. So for this also gene interaction studies will be very useful. So gene interaction plays a crucial role in understanding the complex phenotypic variation in organism. So if any sort of variation that you can see in the F1 or F2 generation, which are the genes that are responsible for them, how are they interacting with one another, could also be understood by studying gene interactions. So gene interactions are important for understanding how complex genetic system evolve by studying how genes interact over time. So as and when they evolve, as and when time goes, how these genes interact with them and what would be the possible phenotypic characteristics of an organism, that can also be understood. So gene interactions are complex and they are involved in various molecular mechanisms. So understanding these complex interaction is very essential for understanding how genes work together, coordinate together to give you different biological processes. So gene interaction, understanding whether it is at the level of allelic gene interaction or at the level of non-allelic gene interaction, how are they interacting with one another, how many number of genes are involved for a particular characteristics, can all be understood under gene interaction. Thank you.